Hello, chemists. Welcome back to my laundry room / lab. Today we are going to be talking about your lab number 8, which is the fermentation of sugars. And what this video is really going to be focusing on is your setup and your safety. So the first things first is you will notice before I even get started, I am wearing my requisite safety outfit. So we've got goggles, apron, gloves. Now, because we're in the Halloween season, happy October, you could always double this as a Halloween costume, put some fake blood on it, you're set. But besides that, really important that you have your safety equipment on before you touch anything else. Now, for this particular experiment, fermentation of sugars, you're going to need 2 different bags from your chemical kit. So the first thing that you'll need is this bag right here. It says fermentation of sugars. We're going to be using almost everything in this kit. So in just a second, I'll show you what equipment is in here and what we'll be using. The other thing that you'll need is your Principles of Chemistry equipment set. So this guy, it's the big bag, and this is the one that has generic materials like droppers, graduated cylinders, scales, etc., etc. So you want to make sure that you have this on hand as well. All right, so I tilted my computer a little bit because what I want to do is I want to walk you through the materials that come in your fermentation of sugars kit. So I wanted you to kind of show you what everything is. There are pictures of it in the lab manual, but just to be sure, let me walk you through what you're going to have. So again, just as a recommendation for you, what I like to do is I like to grab a baking sheet, a plate, some kind of metal tray. And what I like to do is I like to store my chemicals in this tray. And then I like to store my equipment outside of the tray. So again, the benefit of that is if you spill any chemical and you happen to spill it in the tray, it's much more easy to clean up and it's contained. So just a tip, trick kind of from me to you. So in terms of chemicals that are going to be given to you into your kit, you should see a bottle of mineral oil. So hopefully you can see that. So I'll put that on my tray. Then you're going to have a bottle of starch. So starch is a polysaccharide. So it's the same kind of structure of sugar that you'd see in potatoes or crackers. So things that are starchy. So that's that. Should look like a little white powder at the bottom. You can see that. So we'll have a bottle of starch. We're also going to have a bottle of cellulose. So you can see that, cellulose. So cellulose is also going to be a white powder. You'll sort of see it sitting at the bottom of the bottle. And cellulose is also a polysaccharide. So very similar to starch in that it's composed of multiple units of individual monosaccharides. But cellulose is going to have a slightly different chemical structure, which is what you're going to explore as part of your experiment. You're also going to have this little glass vial, and that glass vial is going to be D-glucose. So hopefully you can see that. So just so you know, D is a form of, it's an isomer of sugar, and D-glucose is the one that is the form that we are able to digest, right? So D enantiomer. We also have a package of yeast. So we've got this package of yeast right here. Oh, and I forgot to mention, D-glucose, you should remember that's a monosaccharide, okay? So single sugar unit. Then we have our bag of yeast. This yeast is going to be important because yeast is actually a living organism, and it's the one that's going to actually metabolize our sugars. And we're going to be doing some anaerobic fermentation, which means that it's going to essentially metabolize our sugars without the presence of oxygen to form carbon dioxide and alcohol. So yeast is the living organism that's going to do this. So this is the same thing that you would use to brew beer, to make wine, and also to add to bread to make it rise. So that's your yeast right there. And then the other thing you'll have, so they come in little brown packages. So just kind of a lookout for it. They don't come in bottles. So one of these brown packages is going to be lactose, which is the disaccharide that's found in milk. And then we'll have sucrose, which is an additional disaccharide as well. So we have 2 disaccharides. Both of them are going to be in these brown paper bags. So those are going to go here. So again, if you take a look, my cups are in the way, but what you can see is I put all of my chemicals on my baking sheet, and then I'm going to put all my equipment surrounding it. So the equipment that we're going to need, so these 6 styrofoam cups, these actually come in that fermentation kit, so you should have those. So your 6 styrofoam cups. You should also have 3 pieces of rubber tubing. So what this is going to allow us to do is to actually capture the CO2 that's produced from the fermentation. So when you ferment sugars, you produce CO2 as a result. And so these tubes are going to be attached to our fermentation setup. And then the other tube is going to be in our collection vessel, so we can actually collect and quantify how much CO2 we're producing. So you should have 3 of those tubes. The other thing that's going to be in your kit, and this is going to help with our fermentation setup, so I'll show you. So when they talk about centrifuge tubes, they're these guys. So they're sometimes called conical tubes as well. They have a blue cap and then a pointy end. So you should have 3 of those. Those are those guys. And you should have a little scooper, so a little spoon guy. This is what we're going to use to scoop our sugar and our yeast. We're also going to have, oops, if I don't drop them on the floor, 3 of these dropper bottles right here. So all of this comes in your actual fermentation kit. All right, so the other thing that you will need, so this all comes from that secondary kit, so the big one with the general equipment. So what you're going to need is your balance. You're also going to need a weigh boat to weigh out your sugars, to weigh out your yeast. So you'll need one of those. The other thing that you will need is a dropper pipette. So you'll need one of these guys. You'll need your thermometer. You'll need a grease pencil to write on your tubes, a 10 ml graduated cylinder, and your beaker. So we're going to put all of this together. The other thing that I would highly recommend having, it's not actually on the equipment list, but I would highly recommend getting your test tube rack out. Now, the reason that I like to have this on hand is sometimes when you're managing your setups, I call it running out of hands. So you might be trying your setup, you've got all these tubes flying, you're like, I have this, I need to set it down somewhere so it doesn't tip over. If you have your test tube rack handy, you can always set that down. So even though it's not on the equipment list, I highly, highly recommend getting your test tube rack out and having it ready to go for the experiment. So just to recap, that's all of the equipment you're going to need. And as you can see, my setup here, I have all my chemicals on my tray, and I have all of my equipment surrounding, and I've got my safety gear on. And just a reminder, really helpful, have a clean working surface that you can easily wipe down. I also have a sink next to me, and I have a window for ventilation. So once we have all of that, then we will be ready to demo the experiment. And in the next video, that's exactly what I'm